Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to discuss a very important topic, that is internal credit risk rating system, ICRRS. This is a Bangladesh bank formulated template for assessment of risks of the borrowers. So we all know that the whole banking industry is suffering due to classified loan. So the overall industry's classified loan, as per Bangladesh Bank estimation, is around 35%. So this is highly alarming. So as per global standard, classified loan should not be more than 5%. So whereas our country's total classified loans are more than 35%. So it is very important to 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 understand the risk factors and assess the borrower capacity, assess the borrower's financial strength, profitability strength, liquidity, leverage, and operational efficiency before disbursement of a loan. So sometimes we become too much subjective, and that's why Bangladesh Bank, in 2019, they changed CRG to ICRRS. So it has two parts, that is quantity parts carries 60% weightage, and qualitative parts carrying 40% weightage. So in quantitative parts there are 6 components, and that is fully data driven, and there are hard data driven, so that the conformity bias or subjective bias should can be avoided, and that's why each of the 6 components carries specific weightage. For examples, so the leverage carries 10% weightage, liquidity carries 10% weightage, profitability carries 10% weightage, and the most important, the highest number carries coverage, that is 15% weightage, and operational efficiency carries 10% weightage, and earning quality carries 5% weightage. So these 6 components comprise 60% of weightage out of 100, and qualitative parts carries 40%. So let us get start with some brief analysis about how each of the components is very important for assessment of borrower credit worthiness. So as a banker, it is very important to consider that a good borrower can be classified as well, whether the intentional reason or unintentional reasons, and a great excellent borrower can be classified at any moment because of some internal factors or because of external factors, and there are some unforeseen factors that are beyond our control, and in that case, how much bank is safe. In leverage gives us that safety quotient, that suppose leverage tells us that how much borrowers equity in the business, and and there are 2 criteria, that is debt to tangible net worth carries 7 marks, and debt to total asset carries 3 marks, total 10 marks. So debt to tangible net worth, that means suppose a business entity, and the owner of the business entity, how much investment of the owner in the business, it tells us the equity of the business. So suppose a business is high, a business volume is so high, but if its debt is so high, then the business is vulnerable. If the business is failed, if business is suffering from some natural disaster or something like that, or external economic downturn, or on crisis, or recession, so the borrower cannot pay the bank debt from the business. In that case, how much capable of the borrower to pay the bank due from its own assets. So leverage is a very important tool to justify the borrower's capacity in case of emergency, in case of economic shock, in case of business failure, how much he is capable to pay the bank due back by its own assets, own equity. So the generally debt to tangible net worth, if it is 50%, that is fine, that is absolutely fine. So if the business bank borrowing is 50% to its equity, that is absolutely fine. So the business that is more burdened, with liabilities, and that business is, fragile business or volatile business. So as a banker, we should not invest that kind of concern that is highly leveraged. So here we mean that highly leveraged business means the business that is, burdened with extra loan or extra credit or extra liabilities. So we should avoid this kind of business. Before making investment, we need to make sure that there is a substantial amount of investment by the, entrepreneur or owner of the enterprise, and that will give us some safety margin in the long run. And another important tool is, debt to total assets. So the suppose land, building, equipment, machineries, current asset, non-current assets, if it consists, more than the loan amount or the liabilities, and it means the business is stable. So generally, 70% should be the assets and 30% should be the liability. That is a benchmark. And the second one that is very important, that is liquidity. We all know that as a banker, we provide loan so that we can get the money back in due time, whether it is a quarterly installment or monthly installment, or a half yearly installment. So uh, liquidity is the measure by which we can measure, we can assess the borrower's capacity to pay its short-term loan, installments or interest amount, loan amount. So it is related to cash flow. The more the cash flow is, the more the liquidity the business has is, and the more he can capable of making payment in regular process. So there are, liquidity has, some components, that is current ratio. If the current asset is, it is the current liability is divided by current asset. So how much the enterprise can pay its current liabilities from its current assets. If the organizations or the entity or the proprietorship concern is capable to pay its current liabilities from its current assets, that organization or enterprise is a financially sound, and so as a banker we can borrow that kind of organization. So if the enterprise or the organization or the business entity cannot meet its current obligation from its current assets, and that we should not, lend this kind of, organizations. So before making investment, we need to ensure that their current assets are sufficient to meet its current liabilities. And the second one is quick ratio or cash ratio or acid. It is also called acid test. That means it is a more hard and more rigid, and to justify the actual current capacity of the borrower to pay its debt from its cash or cash equivalent. So all current assets are not easily marketable, or so it is a very more harsher, more rigid matrix. That is how much the current asset, cash and cash equivalent, the borrowing entity has to pay its current liabilities. So if suppose the business entity, if high liquidity, suppose it has 50% capacity, cash capacity to pay its current liability, that is a highly good business concern. So it can, in case of any point of time, it can pay 50% of debt out of its current cash and cash equivalent. That means a very healthy organization, so we should finance them. But if the current or cash and cash equivalent is very low, less than 1%, it is a matter of concern. We should not invest in this kind of organization. So another important thing is profitability. It carries 10 marks, what it is. And profitability is the soul of business. If it does not matter how big the business is, how large the assets is, if their profitability is negative, and they ultimately they cannot pay the money back. So as a banker, we should not invest in a losing concern. If the enterprise is a losing concern, we should avoid lending this kind of organization. And And most importantly, there are some metrics to identify profitability, that is NPM, net profit margin. So if we divide net profit after tax divided by sales, if it is greater than 10%, now we know this is a profitable organization's business concern, and we can invest and learn them. But if the net profit margin is less than 10% or 5%, 2%, so ultimately it cannot pay its money back from its business. So ultimately it for to pay the bank due, it has to be sold its capital or other resources, and ultimately it's a losing concern. So bank fund will not recover in due time. So we should avoid a low profitability organizations. And another metrics of to measure profitability is ROA, return on investment. So we need to identify that how much revenue are generating from assets. So if we divide total revenue, net profit after tax, by total assets, we get the return on assets, how much return the business can generate from its total assets. So ROA is a very important metrics to justify profitability. Another important matrix, that is operating assets to operating profit, operating profit to operating assets. So if we justify, if we assess total operating if we divide total operating profit by total operating average operating asset, and we get some equations, some results. So the more the profit ratio is, the better the organization is. So the fourth criteria, that is coverage ratio, it carries 15% weightage. So as you know, coverage is the ICR, interest coverage ratio, and that means the how much the money, the how much the profit the business are generating, and to pay its interest expense. So ICR tells us that how efficient the organization is to generate revenue, how much revenue the company, the organization, or the business entity is capable to generate and to serve its interest expense. So if we divide earning, EBIT, earning before interest and tax, divided by interest expense, if it is more than 2 times, more than 3 times, generally this is a good concern. It long term it can pay the interest expense in smoothly. But if the ratio is less than 1%, and that means this organization's profitability or coverage is not financially sound, so you should not invest this kind of. So another matrix is DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. That means earning before interest and tax and depreciation and amortization divided by total interest expense plus short-term obligation or principal payment plus interest payment within a year, principal payment, interest payment. If you divide EBIT, earning before interest, tax, and depreciation and amortization by a total principal amount and interest amount, and then we get some results. If it is more than 1%, this is a highly very good organization, profitable organization, and it has enough coverage to serve the debt. But in case of low ratio, it means it's a bad organization. You should not invest this kind of organizations. So another matrix is operating cash flow to debt ratio, operating cash flow to total financial debt ratio. So this coverage ratio gives us clear understanding that how much business is capable to cover my interest expense and principal plus interest expense from its operational activities, from its profit activities. And this is a very important tool. So another important tool, that is operational efficiency. Operational efficiency carries 10 marks. So it is a very important to understand the operational and management capacity of the borrower. So if the borrower lazy, their management capacity is poor, they cannot utilize its resources properly, they cannot collect its receivable in due times, and they cannot properly utilize its stocks, and their sales performance may not be as good. So this kind of organization is also risky. So operational efficiency is a very important metrics to determine the business strength. So there are some factors to determine operational efficiency of the borrower or a business or organization. Number one is STD, stock turnover days. So if the stock turnover days is 62, it vary business to business, but generally if the stock turnover days less than 50 days or 30 days or not more than 100 days, the more the days, the more inefficient are the business is. So and most importantly, STD, stock turnover days, is very important. If we divide inventory by cost of goods sold and multiplied by 360, and we got the result of STD. And generally below 60 days is a very good STD, stock turnover days. And another matrix, that is TDCD, trade debtor collection days, or how much the borrower is capable to collect its sales proceed, how quickly and how efficiently it can manage to collect its debtor. The shorter the days, the good the business is. Suppose someone is selling so much, but it is in debt, in credit sales. If the credit proceeds are not coming quickly, that means the business is not doing well. So in the long run it will suffer liquidity crisis, cash crunch, something like that. So collection of receivable is very important. If the collection days are less than 30 days, it is a good, but if it gets more than 50 days, it is a bad business concerns. So at the end of the day, it cannot pay the loan or installment interest expense properly, because its collections and receivables are long delaying. And another important topic, that is to measure and to assess the operational efficiency, is asset turnover ratio. If we divide total sales by total assets, and we get asset turnover ratio. So another important topic, that is earning quality. If we divide operational cash flow by sales, and we get operational earning quality, because if the cash flow is high and the sales is if the cash flow is high, and that means the quality of the earning is good. So these six elements of quantitative components of ICRR is very important. It's a objectives, it's a data driven matrix. So if as an analyst, or as a credit officer or as an investment officer, it is very important to collect the data properly, financial data, financial stock report, and account statement, bank statement. And if the quantitative data are collected properly with due care, and if it applies to this ICRR Excel template, and if we get we get really a very comprehensive and very objective picture of the business. If the picture tells us that there are metrics, suppose to lending, it is very important to borrower to get 30%, minimum 50% marks out of 60. A borrower must get 30% 50% mark, that means 30 marks out of 60 to justify, to qualify for the loan process. So as an analyst, it is very important to identify the quantitative parts of the borrower. So for proper risk assessment, quantity part is very important. Quantity parts is a very objective, it is data driven, so it will gives us very clear picture of the business without bias. So quantitative part is very important for assessing risk assessment of the borrower before the loan process. And if we can do this, and certainly we can select a very good borrower. Thank you.